Ahoy hoy, I'm Planet Walk, and I've been informed by several people that apparently I am someone who denies science. In particular, I've been told that I deny physics. Why? Because apparently you cannot have water stuck to the outside of a spinning, oscillating, gyrating ball flying through space at 1,000,000 miles per hour. And when people tell me that, my first thought is, well, actually, no, you're the person that doesn't understand the physics here. In fact, if I had to guess, the people that say that kind of thing wouldn't even be able to do any kinds of calculations to show that they understand the physics there. But anyway, when a flat earther says that I don't understand physics or science, obviously we all know that they're a flat earther, so their understanding of science or physics isn't exactly the best. But then there are a lot of people who aren't flat earthers that will say that I deny science. They will say that I deny biology, which is very interesting to me. You see, a lot of my opinions on certain subjects are informed by science, except in places where science doesn't really apply. This is usually in subjects where there's a lot more philosophy involved, because it turns out that science doesn't answer every question in the world. But we will get back to philosophy. For now, we're going to talk about the instance where people say that I deny biology, and obviously I'm talking about vaccines. You see, I'm very much a proponent of getting vaccinated. I think that it's good if people are vaccinated, because that means that there are less people that can spread disease. And especially if we're talking about something like measles. You should definitely vaccinate your kid against measles if you have a kid. But people will counter with, but vaccines cause autism, didn't you hear? Now this is a talking point that I've disagreed with for years. You can go back to 2019, and I disagreed with it back then too. Now when I said that vaccines don't cause autism back then, there are people who normally agree with the flat earth stuff that I have to say, who suddenly said that I was denying science. Now the difference between some of these people and flat earthers is that some of these people legitimately thought that the science was on their side, and to this day still might. Whereas flat earthers will say that the real science, which they apparently have access to, is being suppressed, despite them having access to it. These people would actually sometimes cite sources. However, upon reading their sources, I found that no, their sources don't actually say what they think that it says. Like, one of the sources said that people who have autism have higher levels of mercury, and their takeaway was that this means that the mercury in vaccines is causing that autism. And my takeaway from that study was, that is not the conclusion that the authors of that study arrived at, because the authors noted that there was less mercury in their urine, which suggests that the mercury in their bodies wasn't so much them being exposed to more mercury, but more mercury not being filtered out of their bodies as much. So even though a study was cited, that does not mean that vaccines cause autism. The person who linked that study just misunderstands the science. In fact, the science says that there's no connection whatsoever between vaccines and autism. There have been large-scale studies that have been done which show no connection whatsoever. Me agreeing with those studies that show that there is no correlation whatsoever between vaccines and autism doesn't mean that I'm denying the science, because I'm literally agreeing with the science. Anyway, 2020 rolled around and we got COVID, and a whole lot of people decided to try and inoculate themselves against COVID by being stupid. Yet these people would claim that I was the one that is denying science, and unfortunately, they would sometimes have a point. My ears on the subject came from me hoping for the best, hoping that if people vaccinated themselves, then would get through it. You know, would eventually have COVID as a thing of the past. Unfortunately, people didn't get vaccinated, and so COVID is now here to stay. And why didn't people get vaccinated? Well, because conspiracy theories. It wasn't to do with the science, despite what people might tell you. Any opportunity that presented itself to paint the vaccines as bad was taken, regardless of whether it made any sense. Like, I think people have forgotten that people were claiming that the vaccines turned them magnetic. I'm not making this up, by the way. That's literally something that people claimed. I mean, to this day, people are still saying that the mRNA vaccines will alter DNA, despite mRNA and DNA being two separate things. And even if that were true, these same people wouldn't go for AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson shots because they don't trust all vaccines. Their gripe isn't with the mRNA ones, it's with all vaccines. Now that's not to say that everything that people who were against vaccines said was wrong. There is some evidence that suggests that the Moderna vaccine does have some higher rates of myocarditis in certain groups. However, when I see that, my reaction isn't, oh, vaccine bad, it is, well, good thing I got the Pfizer vaccine. Now, obviously, people will come along and say, well, didn't you know this about the Pfizer vaccine? Didn't you know that about the Pfizer vaccine? You shouldn't have taken that vaccine because you're going to be sterile within 5 months. Now, if your argument is about sterility, then buddy, I don't think the vaccine is what I need to be worrying about. Now, if I disagree with your source that apparently vaccines are bad, that doesn't mean that I'm denying the science. The big issue that we've got here is that there has been an avalanche of bullshit over the past few years. And because of this, my default position is, well, what do the experts say? Because it is very easy to leave out information in order to craft a narrative that is misleading. You get this quite a bit when people talk about excess deaths. They might point to a country that has a high amount of vaccinations and say, look at the excess deaths in this country, then point at another country that has a low amount of vaccinations and say, well, this has less excess deaths. And you look at the data and they are right. However, they might be leaving out something like population difference. I have literally seen that being used as an argument before, because there is a flurry of misinformation. My point here is that I do try to be as accurate as I can, and I'll get things wrong from time to time, but just because I do get something wrong, that doesn't mean that I'm anti-science. It's just that the people that I'm arguing against, who are definitely anti-science, found the one thing that they can latch onto to say that they are right. You just have to forgive me for not taking them seriously when 2 years ago they were saying that vaccines turn you magnetic. Now, I went on for the subject for a lot longer than I meant to. There's a lot of weeds that I could get into here, but we're going to move on to the next thing that people say that I deny biology in, and this one, we're getting to philosophy. Now, because this is philosophy, out of all the subjects in this video, this one is probably the most controversial, because I do not think that abortion is murder. My justification for this is that I do not think that a fetus is a person, and when people hear that, they think that I'm saying that a fetus is not a human. You see, to them, the terms human and person are synonymous. If something is human, then it must be a person. So because I say that a human fetus is not a person, they think that I'm saying that a human fetus is not human, and therefore, to them, I am denying biology. However, what's happening here is that there's a bit of confusion about what the argument is actually about, because I'm arguing philosophy, which isn't biology. My argument revolves around what makes murder wrong, and the thing that makes murder wrong is because you're killing a person. What makes someone a person? Well, it isn't just being a human. There's experiences that that person has had. Also, the fact that someone has autonomy is another thing that makes them a person. A fetus has neither autonomy nor experiences, so therefore I do not think that they can be considered a person. Now, people will interpret this as me denying biology, but I'm not. Just because you do not understand my argument does not mean that I am denying biology. Because that's what's happening here. A lot of people misunderstand what I have to say and think that I must be wrong because of that. Now, here's a little exercise that I suggest people do, and I find that people don't do this enough. If you disagree with a position, try to rationalize it. You should be able to make an argument for them, and they should be able to agree with that argument. Now, sometimes this will backfire. One time I was making a video about Matt Walsh, and I was like, okay, the strongest argument I can think of for this is this. But then people came along and said, no, that's not his argument. Actually argue against his proper argument. I didn't realize that his actual argument was terrible, because it turns out that he was making a religious argument. He just forgot to mention that he was making a religious argument. Now, there is an elephant in the room that I haven't talked about, and that is obviously the subject of trans people. Wait, that's me! Wow, we get to talk about people like myself, yay. Now, obviously, when it comes to this, people will claim that I'm denying biology, not just by simply arguing for trans people, but by being a trans person. Now, in case it isn't clear by now, this is another subject that I do not deny biology on. I know that if I were to look at my chromosomes, I could probably find a Y chromosome floating around there somewhere. Now, you might go ahead and say, well, you've said that you're not a man, and yes, that is definitely something that I know that I've said before. The issue that people are running into here is that they think that when I say that I'm not a man, that I'm saying that my sex isn't male, which is not what I'm saying at all. This is another example where people don't actually understand what it is that I'm saying. When I say that I'm not a man, I am saying that I don't fit into nor identify with the social category of man. Now, I've explained this several times. Several times I've explained this, yet people will still say that I deny biology because I do not call myself a man. Now, I remember having an argument with a flat earther, and the flat earther would say, "You cannot show me water sticking to a curved surface, so therefore it doesn't happen." I tried to explain that water just conforms to the forces acting upon it. But he would say, "You cannot show me water sticking to a curved surface, so it doesn't happen." He didn't want to talk about how forces determine this, so gravity would certainly mean that water would be curved, because in his mind, he hadn't seen a picture of it, so it must not be real. If I showed him a picture of the Earth, well, that's not real, that's CGI, so it's dismissed. If I showed him a picture of a ball, which has water stuck to it like a basketball, well, that's not gravity, so that's also dismissed. The problem is that he was unwilling to engage on a reasonable level, which is what it feels like to be trans. Like, I can explain so many different ways that I am not a man, but it feels like people aren't willing to actually engage with the point that I'm making. No matter how many times I try to explain it, it's still, you haven't shown me a picture of water bending due to gravity, so it doesn't exist. It's impossible. It's still, you deny biology. And that's really what I find frustrating. It seems like there's no way to have an actually productive conversation about it half the time, because people aren't willing to listen. This is a topic that I've wanted to have honest conversation on for over a year now, because a lot of people talk about it, but they completely miss the point. You can't actually have honest conversation about something if you don't actually address the points that are being made. And often I feel like the points that are being made go ignored in favour of something that's more convenient. And often that thing that is more convenient is a straw man, which ignores all nuance in the conversation. Much like the flat earther saying, well, I haven't seen a picture of water curving due to gravity, so therefore water doesn't curve due to gravity. Now, a fair criticism that someone might have is, okay, someone says that you're denying biology, just ignore them because they're an idiot. And for most people, that is reasonable. If you're someone who is trans and people are saying to you, you're denying biology, you're probably good to ignore them if those sorts of comments get you down. For me, on the other hand, if I just ignored stupid people, what do you think my content would be? My whole thing is that I criticize those sorts of people. Unfortunately though, and this is the real problem that I have, it often feels like I can't criticize certain beliefs. Like if I criticize a flat earther or a young earth creationist, people will be like, oh, a new Planet Walk video where they criticize a young earth creationist or a flat earther for the 100th time. And then because people actually watch that video, more people watch that video and they see that I'm trans. And they think, okay, this is someone who is criticizing flat earthers for denying science, or criticizing young earth creationists for denying science, yet they're a trans person, which must mean that they deny science. And then they leave a comment about how I deny science and everything, and then they don't watch any other videos where I actually explain my positions. And I don't want to make every video a video where I say, so I am trans, and that means that I do believe this, 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 and this, but I don't believe this, 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 and this. Because A, that's really tedious, and B, I don't want to make my whole channel about being trans. But at the same time, if people only watch the flat earth videos, then nobody sees my actual positions, and so I get criticized for shit that I've explained 1,000 times. But more importantly, it's something that's actually important. Like, I talked about vaccines and abortion earlier in the video, and those are two issues that are also actually important. Because as much as flat earthers are silly, they don't have any real power. Like, we're not going to see a flat earth president of the United States. That's just not going to happen. A young earth creationist president is more on the table. Wait, has that actually happened? I'm not sure. I feel like it's something that would definitely happen in America. there was a young Earth creationist vice president, because wasn't Pence a young Earth creationist? I don't know. But when we get to vaccines, abortion, and trans issues, people kind of just tune out at those. Despite the fact that someone's decision to take a vaccine has more effect than they may realise, and abortion and trans rights, they're both under attack over the world. I feel like people having their rights stripped away is a bit more concerning than a flat earther who decided to say that gravity is not real for the 400th time. And meanwhile, whilst I'm criticising that flat earther, people are criticising me for things that I don't even believe. Isn't the world lovely? And then, to wrap it all up, the flat earther comes along and fucking says that I deny biology. And whilst all that's going on, there are people that continue to claim that trans people deny biology, thus ensuring that I will forever be told about how much I deny biology when I don't. But here's the thing, I could always join them. Seems quite profitable, actually. Probably wouldn't do too well mentally, and there's a problem that I'd be, morally bankrupt by doing so. But I'd do well, and as a plus, I wouldn't have to care about the truth. At least if people criticise me for being anti-science, then they'd be right. But at that point, I might as well become a flat earther as well, because don't forget, it's not just biology that I deny. Flat earthers say that I deny physics.